This is the Mauna Kea report for May 15th. Opponents of the proposed 30-meter telescope, or TMT, a billion-dollar observatory to be built on the summit of Mauna Kea, filed a last-minute notice of appeal Monday afternoon with Hawaii's Third Circuit Court, according to the Hawaii Tribune-Herald. The 6 petitioners were recently unsuccessful in their contested case during the TMT's Conservation District Use Permit application before the Board of Land and Natural Resources. The board has given the TMT the okay to proceed. As they told us a few months ago, opponents believe the BLNR approval violates the rules the Land Board is sworn to uphold.
The 8 criteria. How about the view plane? How about destruction of cultural sites and saying no, it won't? That's 8 acres. 8 acres will be cemented.
The other side is arguing that if the 8 criteria were followed to a T, that there would be no telescopes on the mountain. I think that is the proper story to tell.
Astronomers with the GEMINI Observatory on Mauna Kea were able to catch a glimpse of a shockingly bright gamma-ray burst 3.6 billion light-years away, nearby for an event of this size. The GEMINI team quickly obtained the first ground-based optical spectrum of the high-energy event within 90 minutes of its first detection by both Fermi's gamma-ray burst monitor and NASA's SWIFT satellite. GEMINI's data was used to determine the distance of the powerful stellar explosion. Astronomers believe the majority of the gamma-ray burst, or GMBs, form when a massive star collapses into a black hole, expelling jets of matter outward at nearly the speed of light, which we see as a powerful burst of previously unseen energy.
Gamma rays are the highest energy form of light.
There's the light we see with our eyes, but there are lots of other types of light. Gamma rays are the most energetic form of light, the most powerful.
Gamma rays are the part of what we call the electromagnetic spectrum, which starts in radio at very long wavelengths, goes through optical, then through X-rays, and then gamma rays are the very highest energy form of that type of radiation.
The reason that it's important to look at the high-energy gamma rays is that many objects, the most violent and some of the most interesting objects in the universe, emit most of their light in this high-energy gamma ray part.
And the only thing that can generate gamma rays are incredibly violent events, incredibly energetic events, and we're talking stars exploding and neutron stars with really strong magnetic fields and really exotic and strange objects like that.
It's like a Christmas tree. It's shining and it's flaring and there are eruptions every day.
Gamma-ray bursts being an example, something that for a brief instant of time outshines the entire rest of the universe.
These are the biggest explosions in the universe.
There is an above-normal potential for significant wildland fires in leeward areas of Hawaii Island this summer. New maps released by the National Interagency Fire Center show a higher-than-usual likelihood that wildland fires will occur and/or become significant events in the months of July and August. As existing drought conditions in West Hawaii are expected to persist or intensify, South Kohala and North Kona will be under an above-normal fire threat. Many living in that area are already well aware of the dangers of wildfire and are no stranger to red flag warnings. A portion of Maui will also be on alert at the same time. Nationwide, this year, significant fire potential is predicted to be above normal in much of the West, including almost all of Arizona, New Mexico, California, Oregon, and Idaho, as well as portions of Montana, Colorado, Utah, and Washington. In 2012, 9.3 million acres of private, state, and federal land and more than 4,400 structures burned in wildfires. That was the third highest number of acres burned since at least 1960, the earliest date with reliable records. Officials urge residents of the more than 70,000 communities at risk from wildfires to plan ahead. Resources are available at fireadapted.org and through the FireWise and Ready, Set, Go programs. Speaking of wildfire readiness, a draft environmental assessment was published for fire dip tanks at 2 sites on the southwestern slope of Mauna Kea. The Department of Land and Natural Resources, Division of Forestry and Wildlife, plans to construct the water tanks and related infrastructure to assist in fighting fires. The sites are located in the Kahu Game Management Area off Road 1, about a half-mile above the Kilohana Hunter checking station, and the other 700 feet south of Pu'ula'au. The covered 40,000-gallon tanks will hold water obtained from trucks or catchment. The sites are located within the State Land Use Conservation District and Palila Critical Habitat, and the environmental assessment states the project will protect the values of these areas. Volunteers traveled up Mauna Kea this weekend, where they helped pull invasive weeds and planted 100 Mauna Kea silver swords. Organized by the Office of Mauna Kea Management, the primary agency responsible for the University of Hawaii management areas on Mauna Kea, Saturday's effort focused on restoring native habitat surrounding the visitor information station at the 9,500-foot elevation, an ideal spot, according to Springer Kay, manager of the Big Island Invasive Species Committee.
Well, for this area, because it's a nice fenced-in area here on Mauna Kea, it's protected from goats and sheep, so we can really get a population established that everyday people can drive right up and see these plants and get to know them. Because I'm with the Invasive Species Committee, our major goal is to get this area weed-free. So after the volunteers are done planting, they're going to go through and remove all the fireweed from this area.
Sort of test it out. That's about the right depth.
Natural Resources Program Manager FRITZ KLASNER explained the partnership with the State Division of Forestry and Wildlife.
DOFA, the Division of Forestry and Wildlife, has a grant from the federal government to propagate keiki silver sword in a nursery lower down on Mauna Kea, and then they plant them every spring. And they had plants and they needed to put some more in the ground, and the Office of Mauna Kea Management has a volunteer program, and our volunteer program, the Division of Forestry and Wildlife contacted us and asked if we were interested in planting silver swords in here in this enclosure. And this enclosure that we're standing in today is actually Department of Land and Natural Resource land, part of the Mauna Kea Forest Reserve. It's fenced off for silver sword.
So that's the planting, and then from there it's just a matter of making the rock ring. Have fun with rock art.
A record number of more than 35 volunteers helped on Saturday. It was the first replanting of native habitat after 1,500 volunteer hours of invasive weed pulling on the mountain.
Okay, yeah, so I'm making a ring of rocks around the silver sword, and this helps with moisture. The moisture will fall inside of the rocks, and it also shows people that there's something here, so it kind of protects it.
Volunteer Thomas CHUN also serves on the Kahu Mauna Council, named by the Mauna Kea Management Board.
Having a day like today gives us an opportunity to give back. So often we consume, or we take even the vistas that we have here, but these plants won't be here unless we help them. So I guess if we weren't here in the first place, they would be here. But because we are here, this gives us an opportunity to maybe reestablish some of the things that used to be here.
Are you going to keep that orange flag there? I am going to keep the orange flag so that people know that there is a silver sword or something outplanted here, and it also will help us in watering.
Our main target species out here are fireweed, mullein, and some of the invasive grasses that really do a lot to suck up the water. Water is the biggest issue out here for native plant regeneration, so anything we can do to make sure that the native plants are getting their share is a success. I think one of the questions people always have is, what's the purpose of going out and hand pulling a weed on a mountain that's so big? And what we find is that for the rare native plants, the weeds in the immediate area really hurt them. They suck up all their water, they keep them from growing and keep them from having babies. So we really appreciate having the volunteers come out. They do make a difference. They cut back on the seed bank, and what we see is over time less and less of these weed plants regenerating in these areas, and it's just inspiring and gives everyone a lot of hope.
On a landscape scale, we're not going to stop fireweed or mullein from moving up the mountain. But what we want to make sure is that we, being the activities that occur up on a mountain, whether it's astronomy or the public coming up or other types of activities that are here, aren't spreading invasive species. And by pulling stuff around these facilities, we limit one of the sources or the vectors from coming up. But also by removing the invasive plants, we remove a food source for invasive insects, and insects are one of the summit of Mauna Kea is really an insect-dominated ecosystem, and by removing the insect habitat for invasive insects up here, we're limiting or mitigating that risk from invasive insects from coming up the mountain as well.
We're just so excited because the silver swords have been so rare. They've been kind of kapu for the longest time. Most people in Hawaii have never seen a silver sword, at least not a Mauna Kea silver sword, and certainly have never held one in their hands. So this is a really unique and I think first-time event to have so many people out here planting these plants.
The Mauna Kea silver sword is a member of the Silver Sword Alliance, a group of endemic Hawaiian plants that scientists believe all evolved from a single plant species which originated in North America several million years ago.
The Mauna Kea silver sword is so unique because it's only found on Mauna Kea. It's only at high elevation. It can't survive down low. And it became very rare when the mountain became overrun with sheep, goats, and feral cattle. So now that we have fewer animals on the mountain and we have areas like this that are fenced off, we can bring up their numbers and hopefully they'll start to spread out into the wild.
These silver swords actually weren't around even 20 years ago. They had to find these silver swords in some of the gulches along here. And because they were protected and the goats couldn't get to them, they provided us with the seeds and the starts. And so now they're being raised in a nursery, but we're giving them an opportunity to come back and maybe live in an environment that they used to be here.
A Mauna Kea silver sword grown naturally in the wild can live for more than 50 years. Once they establish a firm root system, which should take about 1 year, these plants are expected to live on Mauna Kea for decades to come.
So we'll be watering in these silver swords twice a week for the next month or so, and then after that we'll continue to water once a week for another 5 months or so, or until we get some real rain or fog up here to water things in. The Big Islands and much of the rest of the state has been in a pretty severe drought for the past few years. You can see that with all the brown vegetation up here right now.
So I have 3 boys in 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade at Lapohoihoi Charter School, and their dad, my husband, is a teacher there, so we've got kind of the school effort going on up here too.
Alright, so you can sleep in it.
And just seeing the kids get their hands on these plants, and they've learned about them in school from outreach programs. Now they get to really come up and see it and help out, so that means a lot to me.